Hi there and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington on a very busy afternoon. We are awaiting the president as the White House is teasing what it calls a significant medical announcement tied to autism. We will bring you that when it gets underway, but we're going to begin with breaking news. Disney just moments ago announcing that Jimmy Kimmel Live will return to ABC tomorrow night. The news coming less than a week after Kimmel was suspended indefinitely in the wake of comments he made accusing Republicans of trying to score political points with Charlie Kirk's assassination. NBC News correspondent Liz Kurtz joins me now for more on this. Liz, I know this news just broke, but tell us what Disney is saying.
Yeah, hey, Ryan. Well, 5 days ago is when Disney made this decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel. They have been silent since then. Now they are breaking that silence, putting out this statement announcing he's returning tomorrow night. Here's what they said. They say, last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It's a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. Of course, this announcement is huge and opens up many, many questions. How will Jimmy Kimmel respond to it himself tomorrow night? Will he apologize? Disney made this decision after pressure from the FCC chairman, but also announcements from station groups, Nexstar and Sinclair, that said that they were not going to air Jimmy Kimmel on their ABC-affiliated stations. Sinclair even went out and said that they had a list of demands to be able to air Kimmel again. That would include Kimmel apologizing directly to the Kirk family and also giving a donation to the Kirk family and to Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA. So we haven't heard from those station groups yet. We are out to them for comment, but we'll be monitoring all the reaction to this big news.
And at this point, do we have any idea what we should expect from tomorrow night's show? Could there be an apology? What could possibly happen?
I think that's the big question, is what is Jimmy Kimmel going to say? Has he been able to reach an agreement with the Disney company? Will he criticize the move? But we are getting some reaction from Democrats who are applauding this, including Governor Gavin Newsom. He says, thank you to everyone but Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman. This is a win for free speech everywhere. And this comes amid huge pressure from Disney. 400 celebrities today signed a letter by the ACLU condemning Disney's decision. That includes Meryl Streep, Jennifer Aniston, Ben Affleck, huge names calling out the company for what they say was caving to pressure from the Trump administration and really being a crackdown on free speech. We saw a number of celebrities, Howard Stern, Cynthia Nixon, and others calling for boycotting Disney, including many people saying that they have canceled their Disney Plus and Hulu subscriptions. So this has been 5 days of a PR nightmare for Disney, and I'm sure they're hoping to turn it around, but it's certainly not over yet. We're waiting for reaction from President Trump himself to see what he says to this decision.
I think Howard Stern said he personally canceled his Disney Plus subscription in response to this. All right, Liz, you've been all over this story. We'll have more on this fallout on this announcement later in the show. Thank you for being here. But as I mentioned, we're still waiting on what President Trump has teased as a major announcement on autism. This weekend, the president also appearing to confirm reports that part of that announcement would raise concerns about pregnant women's use of the pain reliever acetaminophen as potentially linked to autism spectrum disorder.
I think we found an answer to autism. How about that? How it happens, so we won't let it happen anymore, and how to get at least somewhat better when you have it.
Multiple news outlets are reporting that you plan to tie Tylenol to increased risk of autism. Can you confirm that?
Well, we're going to see tomorrow. We're going to do it tomorrow, but I think it's a very big factor. I think you'll see what it is tomorrow. We have various things, but you'll see what it is tomorrow. I think it's going to be a very important news conference, and we want things to take effect immediately.
Tylenol is, of course, the brand name of the pain reliever acetaminophen, which is used in other drugs and medications. The bulk of scientific literature suggests there's no causal link between autism and the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy. And in a statement, Ken Vu, the maker of Tylenol, said that, quote, "We believe independent, sound science clearly shows that taking acetaminophen does not cause autism. Without it, women face dangerous choices, suffer through conditions like fever that are potentially harmful to both mom and baby, or riskier alternatives." Now, autism has been a decades-long focus of the president's Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who pledged to find the cause of the disorder earlier this year and has long promoted disproven claims that vaccines cause autism. President Trump deflecting when whether asked those claims would be part of today's announcement.
Vaccines are very interesting. They can be great, but when you put the wrong stuff in them, and children get these massive vaccines like you give to a horse.
Joining me now to discuss all this ahead of this big announcement, senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, also with me, NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards. Gabe, let's go to you first. The focus on autism is something that Secretary Kennedy has long been focused on himself. Talk to us about the timing of this announcement. Is the president letting Kennedy take the lead?
Well, Ryan, look, I asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt that exact question in terms of the timing. And she was coy about the announcement earlier today in the White House press briefing, saying that she didn't want to scoop the president. But she did say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be looking at this issue through a different lens, and essentially reiterating the fact that RFK Jr. Is trying to take a sledgehammer, basically, to the medical establishment. Now, the Washington Post, citing multiple people familiar with the matter, reported over the weekend that this would, as you mentioned, try to link acetaminophen when taken early on in pregnancy, that it could have some potential link to autism. And the president, as you pointed out in those comments over the weekend, seemed to be very excited about this after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. months ago had kind of said that he would have an answer on all this by September, although critics have said that in order to come up with any sort of answer on the autism question, much more study is needed, Ryan.
And let's talk about the politics of all this. President Trump touting an answer to autism, but this isn't the first issue that he's made big promises on. Is there any risk here that he might be over-promising? The way he described it over the weekend is that autism isn't something we're going to have to worry about anymore. That seems like a big promise to me.
Well, a lot of what President Trump, a lot of his promises are big. He likes to make a big attention-grabbing, headline-grabbing promise on this one. And when it comes to other cases, not just the president, but others in his administration have overpromised. And in the case of, for example, the Jeffrey Epstein files and the investigation into the death of Jeffrey Epstein, they promised for a long time that more information would be coming out, and then they were backed into a corner, as you know, as this has played out on Capitol Hill as well, when turns out that they then had to back away from that when the Justice Department determined that Epstein died by suicide, and so many in the MAGA base were upset with that. But when it comes to autism and it comes to making America healthy again, this was an issue that really rallied the base, especially in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. President Trump realized that this is an issue that many of his supporters feel very strongly about, and they like the idea of bucking the establishment here and looking at this through a different lens, as the president's press secretary described earlier today, Ryan.
And we don't know exactly how much vaccines are going to be a part of this announcement today. We heard his comments on vaccines. Yeah. The president seemed to have some mixed messaging on their efficacy over the last month. Can we expect more action on vaccines from this administration, even if that announcement doesn't come today?
Well, look, that's a major question at this point. We don't yet know how far the administration will take the issue of vaccines. It was just a couple of days ago, or perhaps weeks ago now. Everything seems to blur together a little bit. But the president, remember that after years of touting the success of Operation Warp Speed, the rush to develop the COVID vaccine, he is now raising questions about that as well, saying that he wants the scientific community to, learn more about the efficacy of the COVID vaccine and whether it was worth it. So the president's certainly using this to his political benefit when he can. Unclear, though, how far the change in vaccines, widespread change in vaccines, how far that the administration will take that, Ryan.
Okay, Gabe, we're still waiting for this announcement to begin. When it starts, you're going to be with us, so stand by. We'll come back to you in a bit. But let's turn now to Erica to talk more about the impacts of all of this. Erica, the president and health secretary, they both pointed to rising rates of autism. What do we know about those numbers, and how has our understanding of the disorder changed?
Yeah, hey, Ryan. So, in fact, the numbers have been growing. In the year 2000, 1 in 150 kids in the U.S. have been diagnosed with autism. In 2016, it was 1 in 54. Now it's 1 in 31 8-year-old children in the U.S. who have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Now, experts who have been studying this for decades say that there's nothing new biologically going on, right, to lead to this increase. And as an aside, I will say that, upwards of 65% of pregnant women in this country take Tylenol at one point or time during their pregnancy. The point is there's just sort of growing awareness of the disorder and a wider definition of that autism spectrum. Ryan?
And is it possible, or can it even be linked to one single cause, autism?
No, it cannot. People in the autism community worry that today's announcement will oversimplify the root of autism. This is an extremely complicated disorder that's been linked to a combination of environment and genetics. Hundreds of genes so far have been linked to autism, have been identified to play a role. And I had the same question as Gabe, why now? What is is there any new data right now that's leading the president to make this this announcement today? The experts I've talked with said that they haven't seen anything new in months. Brian?
And we also believe that today's announcement will not just be about causes, but even a potential treatment. What do we know about the drug that they're focused on to treat autism?
Yeah, so the White House is also expected to tout a form of folic acid, a B vitamin called leucovorin. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, yes, leucovorin, as a potential treatment for autism. Now, there are some early studies suggesting that it might help some children improve their speech, but this is just one of a parade of promises that have been given to people in the autism community over time. They've been given, special diets, hyperbaric chambers, the list goes on. And so experts say a lot more research has to be done with this particular vitamin in order to, really tout it as a potential treatment for autism.
Okay, Erica, you stand by as well as we wait for this press conference to begin with news from the White House on autism. But let's break it down with some of our experts. Dr. Veronica Gillespie-Bell is a board-certified OBGYN based in Louisiana. And Brian Lee is a professor of epidemiology at Drexel University. And he's actually one of the authors of a study examining autism and the use of acetaminophen in pregnancy. So he's a subject matter expert here, and we're going to get his take on this. Let's start with you, Dr. Gillespie-Bell. You're an OBGYN. You probably have patients in front of you on a regular basis who need help with fevers or pain dealing with their pregnancy. What's your reaction to the reporting about what we've heard about the potential use of acetaminophen in pregnancy? Are there safe alternatives, or is there anything more safe, I should say, for treating pain or fever for pregnant women?
Thank you for that question. There really aren't safe alternatives. We know that Tylenol is safe when it is used as directed. Now, we always recommend patients consult their providers before taking any medication, but Tylenol is safe, and there is no data that shows that it causes autism.
Could there be more unintended consequences for not using something like acetaminophen to treat a fever or during a pregnancy? What are the potential risks of letting a fever go untreated during pregnancy?
Absolutely. So having a fever in pregnancy, especially in the first trimester, is very dangerous. We know that that can lead to miscarriage. That can also lead to fetal malformation, so fetal defects. So having a fever that goes untreated is extremely dangerous. And it's one of the reasons that we do usually recommend Tylenol.
And for folks who may not understand why there isn't always a definitive answer, can you talk to us a little bit about the difficulty of studying the effects of medication in pregnancy specifically?
Yes, specifically when we're talking about autism, as was previously stated, this is most likely multifactorial as far as the causes. So it's difficult to just trace it to one specific thing. In terms of studying medications during pregnancy, again, depending on what outcome we're looking at, there's so many factors that will contribute to that outcome, as we're saying with autism. And so it does make it difficult to study medications specifically in pregnancy.
And then there's also the possibility that they may announce some sort of treatment for autism, and that would be the use of a form of a folate to treat autism. Folic acid, which is another form, is already recommended during pregnancy. What role does it play in neurological development?
So folic acid is very important during pregnancy for prevention of neural tube defects. That's when the spine is closing in pregnancy. And so we do recommend folic acid even prior to pregnancy so that that folic acid can be in the system for moms so that that helps with neural tube development.
All right, Brian, let's bring you in now. You were one of the authors on a recent study that found that acetaminophen was not associated with the risk of autism, which seems completely contrary to what we may hear in the next few minutes from the White House. Talk a little bit about this study and how it was conducted and what you ended up finding.
Yeah. So what my team and I did was we looked at 2.5 million pregnancies. The moms and their children followed up to 20 years or so in Sweden. And what we found was, on the surface, a statistical association for slightly increased risk of acetaminophen use during pregnancy in autism and ADHD. But that's kind of an apples to oranges comparison because the moms who take acetaminophen are very different in many ways from the moms who don't. So when you account for the confounding factors that might explain a statistical association, that association disappears. So what we did was a sibling analysis, looking for siblings where one sibling was exposed and the other sibling was unexposed. And so because the mom's genetics are being controlled for, this association went away entirely. That pointed to us that the association was not causation. In other words, this was not a causal effect, but most likely due to confounding factors.
And some folks have pointed to a recent study out of Harvard, which was an analysis of previously published studies that found an association between autism and the use of acetaminophen. Brian, talk to us about the difference in an association or link and a causal relationship. You did a little bit, but maybe get a little more specific.
Yeah, so basically the example I use with my students is that eating ice cream is associated with drowning. But that's not a causal association. And the real reason behind that association is because hot weather increases your ice cream consumption and it increases your likelihood of going swimming, hence risk of drowning. So that apparent statistical association is not a real causal one. And in that same way, this is playing out here. A lot of the studies that have looked at acetaminophen and autism, they're being influenced by other factors beyond control. And so namely genetics is the elephant in the room. So as we know, autism, ADHD, other neurodevelopmental disorders are highly heritable. What that means then is that a large part of this is actually due to genetics. The studies that don't account for this, they're finding a statistical association, but for studies like ours that did sibling controls and controlled for these genetics, we found no evidence of a causal effect.
And how important is that nuance, especially when you're talking about findings like this?
I mean, this is the difference between thinking ice cream causes you to drown and just knowing that they're statistically associated. It's a night and day difference. So, we'll have to wait and see what the report actually comes out and says, but I would be surprised if there were any new evidence to support the conclusions that are coming out of this.
Okay, terrific conversation. Dr. Gillespie and Brian, thank you both for being here. We may come back to you both as well as we figure out what happens with this announcement. We're still waiting to hear from the president on that medical announcement. When it happens, we'll take you live to the White House. But first, coming up, we'll have the very latest on the president's crackdown on his critics and the return of Jimmy Kimmel. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. President Trump is vowing to press on with his crackdown on dissent in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, further vilifying his political opponents and pressuring his Justice Department to go after them. The president paid his respects to Charlie Kirk during a moving, hours-long funeral inside Arizona State's State Farm Stadium, calling Kirk a martyr for American freedom and blaming political violence on the left.
I call it sometimes the radical left lunatics. But Charlie didn't say that. He called it the left. He was probably right, but I can't help it. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt doubling down on that rhetoric this afternoon, vilifying the left and accusing the far left base of trying to dehumanize everyone who disagrees with them. The president's tone was in stark contrast to the emotional address from Kirk's widow, Erica, who offered forgiveness for the man now charged with killing her husband.
That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do.
Vice President Vance also speaking at Kirk's funeral, blaming left-wing groups for his friend's killing.
You know, I can't help but think that they tried to silence my friend Charlie Kirk. They tried to silence our dear friend Charlie Kirk. And today, tonight, we speak with Charlie and for Charlie louder than ever.
Now, despite those claims, 3 people familiar with the federal investigation into Charlie Kirk's killing tell NBC News that they found no evidence of ties between the alleged shooter and any left-wing groups. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the president urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to prosecute his political enemies. Posting on social media, "We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now." A day earlier, the federal prosecutor tasked with investigating New York Attorney General Letitia James resigned under pressure after that investigation into potential mortgage fraud stalled. And the Pentagon is placing harsh new restrictions on reporters covering the Defense Department, warning any journalist who reports information that hasn't been approved by the government will have their press credentials revoked. NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins me now. And back with us is NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. So, Kelly, we do have new details about what investigators have discovered about Charlie Kirk's alleged killer, Tyler Robinson. What's that?
And in context with some of the clips you just played from the memorial service, it does stand out because the assertion of they or assigning any responsibility to groups is not what investigators are finding when they're looking at the very specific evidence around Tyler James Robinson, the man who's been charged at the state level with Kirk's murder. And what they're finding is that all of the evidence is pointing back to him, the investigation ongoing, but they're not finding that he had any relationship to any groups that motivated his actions. His family had told investigators that he had become more interested in left-leaning political views in recent years. That's different than being associated with a group and then you act on that. So at this point, they're still saying that their evidence is leading them at this point to the conclusion that he has acted alone.
Yeah, okay. So, Gabe, let's go to you now. President Trump said that he hates his opponents during his remarks at Charlie Kirk's funeral. Is the administration standing by those comments, especially amid the calls to turn down the temperature in the wake of Kirk's killing?
Oh, Ryan, they are certainly standing by those comments. The press secretary earlier today saying that the president was being, quote, authentically himself. She thought that this was why millions of Americans love and support him. That's according to Caroline Leavitt. Now, I asked Caroline Leavitt earlier today about this very issue and about some comments the president has made previously, including during his inaugural address about political persecution in this country. Listen to what she said. I want to point to something that the president said during his inaugural address. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. We will not allow that to happen. Is the president going back on his promise?
No. In fact, the president is fulfilling his promise to restore a Department of Justice that demands accountability. And it is not weaponizing the Department of Justice to demand accountability for those who weaponized the Department of Justice. And nobody knows what that looks like more than President Trump. We are not going to tolerate gaslighting from anyone in the media or from anyone on the other side who is trying to say that it's the president who is weaponizing the DOJ. It was Joe Biden and his attorney general who weaponized the DOJ.
So the White House certainly going on offense there, Ryan, and trying to make the case that in their view, this is not about weaponization or persecution. This is about accountability, again, in their view, Ryan.
Okay, Gabe, thank you for that. Kelly, I want to turn back to you then. I mean, they say they're not weaponizing the Department of Justice, but the president's now openly going on a social media channel, basically instructing his attorney general, which is a huge departure from the way presidents and attorney generals interacted in past administrations, and telling her specifically to go after his political enemies. I mean, how else do we read this?
The norm has always been that a president would avoid seeking to influence the outcome so that whatever investigations are pursued by the Department of Justice would not have any political taint. This is very much in line with how the president communicates, using his social media in what had the feel of almost a direct message to the attorney general addressed to Pam, and then a lengthy exhortation about what he wants to have done. But we've also seen specific examples. In the Eastern District of Virginia, the U.S. attorney resigned abruptly Friday. The president says he was fired, and that appears to be linked to a failure, a declination to indict Letitia James, the Democratic Attorney General of New York, over allegations related to mortgage paperwork. So that seems to be an indication of not charging someone and being out of a job. Is the line that simple? That remains to be seen.
Well, and then we can take it a step further, because the person replacing him, what does that appointment tell us about the way the Department of Justice could potentially prosecute the New York Attorney General? Well,
the president reached into his stable of personal lawyers who have been taking up places in the government. And so he has said he wants Halligan to go into this role on a permanent basis. There's an interim who is in the job for the moment, but it's unclear exactly how that will go forward. But again, this is what on the face looks like a loyal, someone who defended Donald Trump personally and has been a part of the administration, now having a role where one of the first questions will be what happens with the case against or pursuing, if there is a case, regarding Letitia James or others.
And then finally, Kelly, MSNBC reporting that the Trump border czar, Tom Homan, was under investigation by the FBI for allegedly accepting a bribe, but that investigation was shut down once Donald Trump won the presidency. What do we know about these allegations against Homan, and what is the Justice Department saying about why it was closed?
He is a very visible figure, so people have heard him talking about deportations and immigration. This happened prior to the Trump administration coming into play. He was anticipating being a part of a future Trump administration. There is a sting with a recording that shows him or depicts him or in some fashion records him taking a $50,000 payment. Today, with a couple of days since this became news, the White House says, no, he didn't take the payment, and they fiercely defend him. According to both the FBI and the Department of Justice, they reviewed the material when they came into office and decided there was no evidence to pursue anything further. They're also calling it politically motivated.
Okay. Kelly, on top of a lot of things for us as always today. Thank you for that. Up next, we'll dive deeper into the political fallout in the wake of Charlie Kirk's tragic assassination and the return of Jimmy Kimmel as the president attempts to crack down on his critics and journalists. My panel joins me now to break it down when we return. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We are still waiting for the president to speak with what the White House is billing as a significant medical announcement tied to autism. We will go there when that happens. But meanwhile, as mentioned, the White House is also defending President Trump's recent comments, saying that he hates his opponents while simultaneously blaming Democrats for the current political environment. Here's more of what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said today.
Many Democrats in elective office have now been totally captured by a radical fringe of the far-left base who want to dehumanize every person they disagree with. We must continue to call this wickedness out. It's the only way that our nation can heal.
We heard from the president who said, I hate my opponent and I don't want the best for them. How does that square with bringing down the temperature of political violence in this country? And then, if I could, I had a follow-up on Venezuela, too.
Look, the president is authentically himself. I think that's why millions of Americans across the country love him and support him.
Joining me now to talk about all of this on a very busy day, Mariana Sotomayor, the congressional reporter for The Washington Post, Michael LaRosa, former press secretary to former First Lady Joe Biden, and Stephen Hayes, the CEO of The Dispatch and an NBC News contributor. Mariana, I mean, what do we make of this rhetoric from the president over the weekend? I mean, we heard a lot of the speakers at this event talk about bringing the temperature down, trying to find a space for everyone to be able to speak freely, even Charlie Kirk's widow forgiving the person who committed this atrocity or is alleged to have committed this atrocity. The president seemed to strike a much different tone.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a stark juxtaposition when you hear Erica Kirk saying, I forgive my husband's killer. And you hear Trump say, well, you know, I disagree with Charlie on one point, and that is forgiving my enemies. He said, I hate my opponents. You know, I don't want the best for them. And it comes at a time where we just see the president just out in the open, very different from what we've seen past presidents do, calling on the Department of Justice and specifically his attorney general to go after his political opponents. I mean, I think after Watergate, there was so much distrust among the American public that many presidents after that point really tried, and I would say government officials did not want the perception or even the slightest appearance of political interference between the executive and the Department of Justice, the FBI.
Yeah.
This is different.
Yeah, Michael, it's interesting that Mariana's tying those two things together, right? He says in front of a crowd of 100,000 people, I hate my political opponents. Then ostensibly either on the plane ride home or shortly after he got back to the White House, texts what it looks like a direct message to Pam Bondi telling her to go after his political opponents. I mean, how unprecedented is this?
Well, you've covered him for a very long time. I've run against him, like with the Biden campaign. I've covered him as a producer. He's earned his success and his political capital by being exactly that. And I would never expect anything different. I don't think anybody, I mean, I would hope not by now that nobody in the press, or at least in my party, should be surprised that we're not looking to him as a uniter or healer. That's never been what he's wanted to be. And he's never asked to be, never tried to be. And his voters made a deal with him. And that was who they wanted. And that's what we're getting.
Yeah. And Stephen, I think probably asked you this question many times about whether or not it's going to change that base that Michael talks about. But I did see some subtle signs of this over the past couple of days. You saw Ted Cruz very uncomfortable with the way the FCC was intervening in the situation with Jimmy Kimmel. Rand Paul as well, Tucker Carlson also. And then you even heard Tulsi Gabbard at the event talk about how free speech was so important, that Charlie Kirk embodied free speech. Is the president maybe going even further than what his supporters, or at least maybe a section of his supporters, are comfortable with?
I mean, probably not. Yeah. He'll probably come around, right? We've heard this before. We've had these moments before. But I think it is telling. The president campaigned on retribution. So Michael's exactly right. Nobody should be surprised about any of this. And it's arguable that some of the stuff he said during the campaign as a candidate was every bit as aggressive as what we heard from him at the memorial. I think what's you know, I wouldn't say different, but maybe striking about this moment is that it came at a memorial, is that it came in a context where you've had some people, some unexpected people, stop and say, like, man, this is too much. We're going too far here. And especially because it came after what I thought was really a beautiful speech by Charlie Kirk's widow. The contrast with the president was so striking. But even at the moment, he got laughs from the audience. Yeah. They liked what he was saying. He sort of was giving them permission for them to have those feelings themselves.
And there's a long history. I'm not giving cover to him going after his enemies or you know, being so direct and sort of unconventional in how he's communicating to his attorney general. But there's been a history of presidents, Democratic presidents, who have used the regulatory process, the IRS, the FBI, law enforcement, the political process to go after their enemies. There's a long history from Wilson to FDR to Kennedy to even Obama was accused of doing such things at the DOJ when it came to funding conservatives groups, applying for tax-exempt status, or going after whistleblowers and journalists. And so that's nothing new. I think what's still a shock to our system is that he does all of this out in the open. Is that he does say the quiet part out loud. I'm not making the argument. Some would say that's a little bit more small d democratic, actually, that he's doing it out in the open. The courts have their opportunity to rein him in, and then the voters have their opportunity to punish the party in power.
Okay, so Mariana, let's talk about the Jimmy Kimmel of all of this. ABC had a very difficult decision to make. They decided they're going to bring Kimmel back. This was after pulling him off the air for 5 days. There's been this kind of back and forth between conservatives on the internet and liberals on the internet, where conservatives are saying this is just the marketplace. Liberals saying, no, this was the FCC basically threatening these local television stations and Disney. How does Jimmy Kimmel respond to this when he comes out and speaks for the first time tomorrow night?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what his ratings are going to be tomorrow. I feel like sure so many people are going to tune in, especially because what we have right now is a statement that says, you know, we talked to Jimmy for a long time and came to an agreement. I don't know if that means that they will, or the way that he will be, talking about this has been crafted in a special way with ABC. I don't know. I mean, I am curious to see what led to this decision, because it very much seemed like it was a done deal, and the Trump administration was talking about it as they were celebrating this, right? They were celebrating this decision. Trump was now pointing his eyes to some of the comedians on NBC, saying that they were next. So we'll see what the aftermath is moving forward. But it's just interesting. A week ago, we were in a different place, and now we've seen this kind of full circle. Yeah. And I'm curious to know why.
Stephen, do you want to see what Kimmel says before you declare that ABC has actually stood up to Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear that ABC has stood up to anybody at this point. We'll see what he says. But I mean, some of this, it's like you have to take a step back from some of these discussions, because this is farcical in so many respects. I mean, Brendan Carr made his comments on the podcast of Benny Johnson, who's fired twice for plagiarism, one of the cardinal sins of journalism. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's a distortionist. And in that interview, Brendan Carr says, well, we might not need to go after these news organizations because they're distorting the truth, distorting the news. Really? You make that claim on on his podcast, Benny Johnson's podcast? This is what the White House is doing, though. They're not even really pretending that there's an argument there. They're sort of fine living with the hypocrisy. They just think we've got the power, we're going to go after
So is it
them.
incumbent upon these organizations to stand up to them and be defiant to a certain extent?
I don't believe that universities or private corporations, private companies feel like it's their job to capitulate or cave or stand up to anybody in government. I mean, it is their job to work with government, no matter who is president. Nothing is frozen in politics. This town could look very different in a year and a half, and most people in the private sector, I believe, know that. And they don't want to be doing the Democrats' bidding either, whether you're a liberal university or a network. I don't think. I mean, the networks have.
Isn't that part of the problem? I mean, isn't that one of the reasons
just
that we
a
got
bottom
here?
line issue?
Trump came in to drain the
swamp.
swamp. I mean, he's actually making the swamp swampier because everybody understands it can be these kinds of transactions.
So then you have to decide as a company or a community or a university, how much pain do you want to take? Do you want to be part of the problem, or do you want to be part of the solution with the current people who have the ability to regulate you?
I don't deny that you're describing reality, but think about what you're saying. It's the job of these people who have interactions with the government to determine how much pain they're willing to take. That is a far cry from the way that the framers set up our limited system of government.
If he didn't have the power to do what he's doing, I'm just living in the real world here. Like, I'm a Democrat. I obviously don't want him to be doing a lot of these things, but if he has the authority to behave this way, then what can we do other than try to change the regulatory system when we're back in power? Yeah. But we have to win elections before we can start trying to win the argument as Democrats, in my view.
And we could be going to this event at the White House any second, so we may have to cut you off. But to continue the conversation, Mariana, doesn't it come back to this next election in 2026 where the Democrats at least have to grab at least some slice of power back if they want to stop this encroachment that the White House continues to be hell-bent on?
Absolutely, and that's the argument that House Democrats are making to any fundraiser, anybody that will hear. Yeah, they are raising a lot of money, and we're seeing the redistricting fight, that also play out. That could limit just how many seats Democrats could win, but I mean, that is the argument. We need to win because that's the only real control to stop Trump. That's what Dems are saying.
And this announcement is kind of reflects that problem or that urgency. That if we want to hold people like Bobby Kennedy at HHS and any other cabinet member accountable, we have to win power back. In order to do that, we have to win elections. So let's worry about the philosophical arguments the Democratic Party is having later, and let's just focus on winning.
And think of that, Stephen. How different is a world for Tom Homan, for instance, who's the subject of a pretty damning piece of journalism this week, if the Democrats control the House Oversight Committee? That's a much different situation than the way it currently exists.
Yeah, and in terms of actual investigations and actual oversight, it would be very different for him. I'm not sure it would be very different in sort of the public debate. I mean, you had Republicans and conservatives and populist right-wingers out defending him without even pretending to see the evidence against him. It's just sort of, he's Tom Homan, we like him. Whatever he does is fine with us. Pretty striking set of affairs.
Yeah, and let's talk about this announcement that we're about to go to any minute here, where the president is going to talk about autism. You know, Mariana, I'm sure everyone around the table has a family that's dealing with autism on some level. I have a nephew, actually two nephews, and their families who struggle with it on a day-to-day basis. How is this going to resonate with those families that all of a sudden the thing that they've worked on and struggled with for so long, the president is going to kind of just snap his fingers and make it all go away? If it doesn't go away, doesn't that backfire on him?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely could. I think a lot of those families are going to be listening and wondering, you know, what is this new discovery? How can we potentially access this other medicine, right, that allegedly might be able to help some of these symptoms? I mean, it is an interesting time, right? Because we have so many of these different announcements that have come out, especially from HHS, based on RFK Jr.'s views. So, I mean, it really is going to be up to people to determine whether they are believing what is coming out and doing that research, continuing to do the research and understanding, and families themselves trying to get an understanding as to what can be helpful here.
Stephen, how much room does the president have on this? And he's coming out now. Actually, I think we're just going to go to that, Stephen. You're going to have to hold that thought. You can tell me while we listen to Donald Trump. Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it.
So I've been waiting for this meeting for 20 years, actually. And it's not that everything's 100% understood or known, but I think we've made a lot of strides. Wish it was done a long time ago. Today, we're delighted to be joined by America's top medical and public health professionals as we announce historic steps to confront the crisis of autism. Horrible, horrible crisis. I want to thank the man who brought this issue to the forefront of American politics along with me. And we actually met in my office, is it like 20 years ago, Bobby? It's probably 20 years ago in New York. I was a developer, as you probably heard, and I always had very strong feelings about autism and how it happened and where it came from. And he and I don't know, the word got out, and I wouldn't say that people were very understanding of where we were, but it's turning out that we understood a lot more than a lot of people who studied it, we think. And I say we think because I don't think they were really letting the public know what they knew. Thanks as well to the director of the National Institute of Health, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty McCary. These are great people. Administrator of the Centers for Medicine and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and Acting Assistant Secretary of HHS, Dr. Dorothy Fink. So thank you all. Thank you, Dorothy, very much. The meteoric rise in autism is among the most alarming public health developments in history. There's never been anything like this. Just a few decades ago, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. So that's not a long time. And I've always heard, you know, they say a few, but I think it's a lot less time than that. It used to be 1 in 20,000, then 1 in 10,000. And I would say that's probably 18 years ago. And now it's 1 in 31, but in some areas it's much worse than that, if you can believe it, 1 in 31. And I gave numbers yesterday. For boys, it's 1 in 12. I was told that's in California, where they have for some reason, a more severe problem. But whether it's 1 in 12 or 1 in 31, can you imagine? That's down from 1 in 20,000, then 1 in 10,000. And now we're at the level of 1 in 12 in some cases for boys. 1 in 31 overall. So since 2000, autism rates have surged by much more than 400%. Instead of attacking those who ask questions, everyone should be grateful for those who are trying to get the answers to this complex situation. And the first day all of these great doctors behind me were there, I told them this is what we have to find out. Because when you go from 20,000 to 10,000, and then you go to 12, you know there's something artificial. They're taking something. And by the way, I think I can say that there are certain groups of people that don't take vaccines and don't take any pills that have no autism. That have no autism. Does that tell you something? That's currently, is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, yeah, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups, the Amish as an example, they have essentially no autism. First, effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary. That's, for instance, in cases of extremely high fever, that you feel you can't tough it out, you can't do it. I guess there's that. It's a small number of cases, I think. But if you can't tough it out, if you can't do it, that's what you're going to have to do. You'll take a Tylenol, but it'll be very sparingly. It can be something that's very dangerous to the woman's health. In other words, a fever that's very, very dangerous, and ideally a doctor's decision, because I think you shouldn't take it. And you shouldn't take it during the entire pregnancy. They may tell you that toward the end of the pregnancy, you shouldn't take it during the entire. And you shouldn't give the child the Tylenol every time he's born and he goes and has a shot. You shouldn't give a Tylenol to that child. All pregnant women should talk to their doctors for more information about limiting the use of this medication while pregnant. So ideally, you don't take it at all. But if you can't tough it out, if there's a problem, you're going to end up doing it. The other thing that I can tell you that I'll say that they will maybe say at a little bit later date, but I think when you go for the shot, you do it over a 5-time period. Take it over 5 times or 4 times, but you take it in smaller doses and you spread it out over a period of years. And they pump so much stuff into those beautiful little babies. It's a disgrace. I don't see it. I think it's very bad. They're pumping, it looks like they're pumping into a horse. You have a little child, little fragile child, and you get a vat of 80 different vaccines, I guess, 80 different blends, and they pump it in. So ideally, a woman won't take Tylenol. And on the vaccines, it would be good instead of one visit where they pump the baby, load it up with stuff, you'll do it over a period of 4 times or 5 times. I've been so into this issue for so many years just because I couldn't understand how a thing like this could happen. And it's artificially induced. It's not like something that when you go from all of those, healthy babies to a point where I don't even know structurally if a country can afford it. And that's the least of the problems. To have families destroyed over this is just so terrible. I also, and we've already done this, we want no mercury in the vaccine. We want no aluminum in the vaccine. The MMR, I think, should be taken separately. This is based on what I feel, the mumps, measles, and all the 3 should be taken separately. And it seems to be that when you mix them, there could be a problem. So there's no downside in taking them separately. In fact, they think it's better, so let it be separate. The chicken pox is already separate because when that got mixed in, I guess they made it for a while, it really was bad. So they make chicken pox. Individually, they're
all right, we're going to continue to listen in to the president's announcement here, but we do want to fact check a little bit of some of the claims that he is making here about vaccines and medications that are taken during pregnancy. With me now, health and medical reporter Erica Edwards. Erica, what most stands out to you here in some of the things the president has said in the initial part of his remarks?
I don't know where to start. So many things. I mean, one are his numbers that he's coming up with. I mean, we've already known that in the year 2000, 25 years ago, it was just 1 in 150 children. The American Academy of, obstetricians and gynecologists all say that Tylenol is the safest drug to take during pregnancy. We already know that 65% of women, when they're pregnant, take this drug at some point or another. We know that fevers during pregnancy can actually be harmful to both mom and baby. It can lead to dehydration and other issues. So that's why doctors recommend bringing those fevers down. He is now going on about vaccines, separating MMR. There is no indication whatsoever that separating those shots, it's just not even possible, right? Like the MMR vaccine has been in existence for decades. It's very safe. It's very effective. What I think that he's probably referring to is last week, CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee was looking into a combination MMR and varicella chickenpox vaccine. They decided that babies as young as 1 year old should not have that combination shot because it can, in very rare circumstances, lead to a febrile seizure, which is obviously very scary for parents to watch. It lasts, a couple of minutes maybe, but it does no long-term damage. The point is that vaccine committee has already sort of known that that can happen in age 1, but has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, which is autism.
Okay. All right, Erica, continue to listen in. We're going to go back to what the president is saying, but if he says something you think we need to check, just let us know.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.